Black woman helps a millionaire fix his broken car. No one saw her. No one even remembered her name. But on that scorching afternoon, under a broken sky, and beside a smoking Maserati, he became the only person who could save a millionaire and unravel the lie that built his empire. And when he saw the ring on her finger, he realized he'd already broken her once, 20 years ago. This is the story of a forgotten promise, a stolen legacy, and the ring that brought everything crashing down. The road shimmered under the ruthless summer sun, cracked and forgotten like a memory no one cared to revisit. Dust danced in the air, swirling around the tires of a broken-down luxury car, an Obsidian-back Maserati Gran Turismo, its hood hissing with heat and betrayal. Inside, Thomas Weber, the man Forbes once called the visionary of a generation, sat pounding the leather steering wheel with clenched fists. The AC had long surrendered to the desert heat, and now steam poured from the engine like an omen. His silk shirt clung to his back, soaked in sweat. He checked his platinum wristwatch, 11:43 a.m. In 17 minutes he was due in front of the biggest investors in the country to pitch the project that would define the next era of Weber Enterprises. He had flown across 3 time zones for this one meeting, and now he was stuck alone on a nameless stretch of highway that didn't even show up on his GPS. He cursed under his breath and loosened his tie, stepping out into the suffocating heat. Opening the hood only made things worse. A thick cloud of steam erupted, forcing him to step back, coughing. He didn't know the first thing about engines. He was a man of vision, of acquisitions and boardrooms, not bolts and pistons. To the world, Thomas Weber was untouchable, a man who had conquered poverty, inherited power, and elevated a family name that once meant ruin. But at that moment, with a car that refused to move and a cell signal that flickered between dead and non-existent, he was just a man, stranded and unraveling. Then, from the distance, came the unmistakable sound of an old engine coughing toward him. A pickup truck, faded red with one missing headlight, rolled to a stop behind the Maserati. The contrast was almost laughable. From the driver's seat emerged a woman who moved with quiet strength. She wore grease-stained jeans, boots worn smooth, and a plaid shirt rolled at the elbows. Her skin glistened under the sun, and her curly hair was pulled into a bun that didn't care what the world thought. "Need a hand?" she asked, calm and steady. Thomas barely glanced at her. "I have a critical meeting in 15 minutes, he snapped, checking his phone again. "My assistant's trying to send help, but there's no damn signal out here." He didn't flinch, didn't even blink. Instead, she walked straight past him, right up to the smoking engine, and peered inside. "It's your cooling system," she muttered after a beat, her voice low but firm. "I can patch it. It'll hold for a few hours, long enough to get you to the city." Yamu stared at her like she had spoken another language. "You're—" "Got a shop 10 miles down," she said, already heading back to her truck for tools. "Name's Maya." He watched her in disbelief. This woman, this stranger, handling his $200,000 0-cents Italian machine like it was a jigsaw puzzle she'd solved before breakfast. She worked quickly, precisely. Her hands, calloused and nimble, moved with a kind of grace that comes only from a lifetime of doing something well, with purpose, not polish. "5 more minutes and you'd have blown the whole engine," she said without looking up. "These models are powerful, but they're fragile, like some people." He must scowled, but something in her tone stopped him from speaking. "How do you even know how to work on a Maserati?" he asked, trying to reassert control. "I mean, in a place like this." Her eyes flicked up to him, calm but sharp. "Excellence isn't exclusive to city skylines, Mr. Weber." He blinked. "You know who I am." He nodded. "Business section. You're on the cover often enough." She shut the hood with a satisfying thud and dusted off her palms. "You should be good now." Thomas exhaled in relief, reaching into his wallet. He pulled out a handful of cash and held it toward her. "Please, take this. Thank you." She extended her hand. And that's when he saw it. A ring, del volo delicate, with a single ocean-blue sapphire. The world stopped. He had seen that ring before. Once. Long ago. In a memory half buried but never truly gone. A boy. A trick, I promise. A sapphire ring passed from trembling fingers to a girl with wide eyes and a soft voice. A girl he left behind when the world called him upward. His breath caught. "Where did you get that ring?" he asked, his voice suddenly unsteady. Maya's eyes narrowed. She curled her fingers, half hiding the jewel. "It was my mother's," she said slowly. "Why do you ask?" But Thomas wasn't listening. He was staring at her, really staring, past the grease, past the years, past the person she had become. And all he could think was, if I hadn't walked away that day, if I hadn't left her behind, would everything have been different? Session 1. The ring that broke the past. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was loaded, with questions neither dared to ask, and a truth hovering just out of reach. Thomas Weber stood motionless, the sun beating down on his immaculate shoes, his designer shirt clinging to his back. But for the first time in years, he didn't notice the heat. He didn't feel the urgency of the meeting he was already late for. All he could see was the silver ring. That ring had no business being here. Not on this road. Not on her hand. "I asked you a question," he said again, this time softer. "Where did you get that ring?" Maya's expression barely changed, but her fingers tightened around the cash he'd handed her. Her eyes, steady as stone, flicked from his face to the car, then back again. "It was my mother's," she said evenly. "It's old. Sentimental value." He took a half-step closer, voice dropping to a near whisper. "Blue sapphire, twisting silver band. That ring was one of a kind." "You know jewelry," she said dryly, eyes narrowing. He didn't answer. Couldn't. His mind was racing back to a place he hadn't let himself remember in years. Open Heart Orphanage. Summer. He was 11. She had been 10. Small, scrappy, but with a fire in her even then. They'd spent every afternoon carving wooden birds and pretending they could fly away. He'd given her the ring the day before he left, swearing he'd return. But life had a cruel way of redirecting intentions, especially for boys groomed for greatness. Quick for girls who had no one. Now, that same girl maybe stood before him, hardened, grown, cloaked in oil-stained denim and an armor of indifference. But it was her. He felt it, in the way she didn't flinch, in the quiet anger beneath her control. "You said it was your mother's," Tomas said, his throat tightening. "Was her name Amelia?" A flicker. Just a flicker in her eyes, so fast he might have missed it, but it was there. He didn't confirm. Instead, she turned toward her truck. "If the patch gives out, my shop is 10 miles down," she called over her shoulder, first right after the Aurora City sign. "Mahika went." She paused. He swallowed. "Do you remember me?" She didn't turn around. Her voice came low and clipped. "You didn't recognize me when I was under your hood. Why would I recognize you now?" And with that, the door slammed shut. The old truck coughed to life, and she was gone. Thomas stood on that road long after her taillights disappeared. When his phone buzzed again, his assistant, desperate, but it had. That rang, that girl. He didn't know her name back then, not really. She was just Bird because of the carvings they made together. He had always meant to ask, always meant to come back, but after his adoption his father made sure the past stayed buried. Yet somehow the past had found him, and now it wore oil-stained jeans, and his mother's ring. Maya's hands trembled as she twisted the wrench beneath a dismantled engine. Back at Hope Mechanical, her shop nestled in the edge of nowhere, she could feel the adrenaline she hadn't let surface earlier. Her jaw clenched, her body tense. He didn't recognize me. Not her face, not her voice. Not the way she'd looked at him 20 years ago when he'd made a promise no child should ever have to depend on. But he had noticed the ring. Of course he had. She yanked the wrench harder than she should have. "Were you going to break the carburetor?" came a voice from the back. Exorbitant tall, gray at the temples with a quiet steadiness that had anchored her through every storm. He approached slowly, wiping his hands on a cloth, reading her tension like a mechanic reads an engine. It was him, wasn't it? Maya didn't answer, just kept working. He came back. She exhaled sharply like the words had punched her. "His car broke down." Of course it did, Xavier muttered, bitter. Fate always has a sense of drama. He didn't recognize me. But he saw the ring, Xavier guessed. Maya nodded once, then glanced toward the wooden box tucked beneath her workbench. Locked but not forgotten. That night, when the workshop had gone dark and the desert winds blew softly across the window panes, Maya sat on her bed and opened the box. Inside were newspaper clippings, dog-eared and yellowing. Thomas Weber appointed youngest VP in Weber Enterprises history. Weber family buys historic water reserve site. Thomas Weber to wed Elise Harrington. Pictures, headlines. At the bottom of the stack was a photograph. 2 children, a carving of a bird, and a ring. Her mother had worn that ring. Until the night she disappeared. Xavier had told her she'd died, but Maya had never believed it, not really. Because the night before, her mother had whispered something in her ear and pressed papers into Xavier's hand. Maya had never seen what those papers were. Until now. He rose, crossed the room, and opened the false panel in the back of her filing cabinet. Behind the manuals and invoices was a thin manila folder she hadn't dared to touch in years. He pulled it out. And there, signatures, stamps, the Weber Enterprises logo, and her mother's name on a forged death certificate. Maya's birth cot. He didn't just forget her. He erased her. The very empire Thomas was set to inherit, the complex he was pitching to investors that very day, was built on stolen land, her family's land, signed away under threat, under silence. It wasn't just abandonment anymore. It was theft. It was wolf. And for the first time in years, Maya felt something hot ignite in her chest. Not grief. Not longing. Rain. He pulled the session 2, the visit that changed everything. The next morning, the bell above the workshop door chimed, soft. Oak Mechanical usually didn't open until 9. Maya was still tightening bolts on an old Pontiac under the lift, her hands already blackened with grease. She glanced toward the door, expecting Xavier or maybe a local rancher with a busted tire. But when she saw him, her grip on the wrench faltered. Thomas Weber stood at the entrance. No Maserati, no suit. Just dark jeans, a navy t-shirt, and eyes full of something she couldn't name. Regret. He stepped inside slowly, as if the floor might reject him. "We're open," Maya said flatly, standing upright and wiping her hands on a towel. "What do you need, Mr. Weber? Another patch job?" "Actually," he said, holding something out in his hand, "I came to return this." She blinked. It was a small carved wooden brooch, worn with time but unmistakable. A bird, wings stretched wide. Her first carving. The one she'd given him on their last day together. She had stayed up the night before, sanding and smoothing the little figure, shyly pressing it into his hand when the orphanage bell rang and the black car came to take him away. Her breath caught. You kept this?" He nodded, not taking his eyes off her. "You were the girl who taught me to carve when everyone else made fun of me. You called it freedom." The word hit her like a wave. Freedom. He remembered whispering it. Remembered sitting on the orphanage steps with him, chipping away at wood while other kids called her names. He had listened, really listened, then left. Maya's voice was hoarse when she spoke. "You promised you'd come back." "I tried," Thomas said, his jaw tightening. "But my father, he had other plans." Footsteps echoed from the back room. Xavier appeared, wiping his palms on a rag, eyes narrowing at the sight of Thomas. "So," he said slowly, voice dry as dust, "the young prince returns." Thomas nodded in acknowledgement. "You remember? Who could I forget the boy who made a promise he never kept?" Xavier said, stepping closer. "You broke her, you know." Thomas took it. Didn't flinch. "I came to explain, and to ask for a chance to make it right." Xavier didn't speak. Instead, he looked at Maya. Her silence was heavier than judgment. "You want to make it right?" she asked. "You think a brooch and a couple of sad eyes can undo what happened?" "No," Thomas replied, "I don't. But maybe it's a start." He took a deep breath and laid everything bare. In 3 weeks I'm supposed to take over Weber Enterprises. I'm expected to marry a woman I don't love. I'm expected to finish the legacy my father built, whether I believe in it or not. Maya crossed her arms. And then yesterday I saw the ring. That ring, and something inside me cracked. He took out his phone, showed her the screen. Dozens of tabs open. Articles, property records, satellite maps. I started digging, he said, into the land where my father built the Aurora complex. The same land you told me used to belong to your mother. Maya's expression shifted, just slightly. Yamas leaned in, voice lower. There's a file in my father's office, marked Project Aurora. Now it was Xavier's turn to go still. I haven't opened it yet, Thomas continued, but something about it doesn't add up. The land was acquired under unusual circumstances. I think my father buried the real story. Maya blinked, because she already knew. He walked slowly to her desk, pulled open the bottom drawer, and handed him the manila folder she'd found the night before. His hands trembled as he opened it. Weber Enterprises letterhead. A death certificate. Amelia Oliveira. But the signature, it was real. His father's. Yamas's face turned pale. He faked her death. Maya's voice cracked despite her best effort. To take our land, and to keep my mother from coming back for me. Amos gripped the edge of the counter. I didn't know. The thing about privilege, Maya said coldly. You don't have to know. You're protected by default. Science again. Except this time it didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a bridge burned but rebuildable. There's more, Maya whispered. She reached into her desk again and pulled out an old photograph. A woman cutting, long braids, soft smile, wearing the sapphire ring. My mother, Maya said. Amelia. She didn't abandon me. She was forced to disappear. Yamas looked at the photo, then back at her. Is she still alive? I don't know, Maya replied. The last I heard from her was 8 years ago, an anonymous letter, but I recognized the handwriting. Where did it come from? Maya hesitated. A psychiatric facility, New Hope, but when I called they said no one by that name was ever admitted. Yamu stood frozen, something turning behind his eyes. What is it? She asked. He looked up at her, voice barely above a whisper. New Hope is a subsidiary of my father's private holdings. Maya's stomach dropped. You think Yamath didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The implication was thunderous. Xavier stepped forward. You need to be careful, both of you. Ernesto Weber doesn't leave loose ends. Yamu straightened, resolve settling over him like steel. Then let's stop being loose ends. Maya looked at him, really looked at him. This wasn't the boy who abandoned her. This was a man who had been lied to, manipulated, and perhaps, just like her, had been a pawn in something much darker. What are you going to do? She asked quietly. Yamas looked toward the window, where the horizon shimmered like a mirage. I'm going to expose him, he said. Maya stepped closer, voice tight. You'd destroy your family's company. Yamas met her gaze. It was never really mine, and if it was built on what I think it was, then it deserves to fall. Maya stared at him. The ring felt heavier on her finger now, the brooch still sitting on the desk beside them. 2 pieces of a story long buried, but not lost. I have a condition, she said. Thomas raised an eyebrow. You help me find my mother, Maya said, her voice trembling. I don't care about the empire. I want the truth. I want her. Yamas nodded slowly, a flicker of something unspoken dancing in his expression. I'll help you find her, he said. I owe her that much. And in that moment, in a small mechanic shop in the middle of nowhere, 2 children, now grown, sealed a pact, not with a handshake, but with a shared wow. The fire to reclaim what was stolen. Session 3, the folder named Aurora. The Weber family estate sat like a fortress atop the hills outside Denver. Manicured lawns, security cameras tucked into hedges, and silence so thick it felt designed to conceal secrets. Yama stood outside the massive oak door of his father's study, a room that had always felt colder than the rest of the mansion, the place where deals were made, loyalties tested, and emotions unwelcome. He hadn't been in this room without permission since he was 17. But permission was no longer something he needed. He stepped inside. The scent of old leather and cigar smoke greeted him like ghosts. Shelves of binders, blueprints, and quarterly reports lined the walls. A massive walnut desk dominated the center, always spotless, as if even dust feared Ernesto Weber. Thomas moved quickly, like a man on borrowed time. His fingers scanned through the file drawers, flipping past mundane labels. And then he saw it. He froze. His hand hovered over the label for a second, then slowly slid it free. Inside was a file folder so thick it looked ready to burst. He opened it on the desk, the pages brittle from age but the ink still bold, defiant. The first document was an acquisition form, land purchase agreement, dated 21 years ago. Seller, Amelia Oliveira. Buyer, Ernesto Weber. Only Amelia hadn't signed it. Her name was scribbled in what was clearly a forged hand, her signature misaligned from the rest. It looked beneath that a notarized death certificate. Date of death, 2 days after the cause drowning. It was stamped inside. But the cigarette. Amos leaned closer. His heart skipped. The notary public's signature had been used by his father on dozens of other documents, even years later. Except this notary hadn't been employed by the state since 1997. It was a fake. He flicked the pages faster now, rage mounting. Lawsuits filed and then silenced. Fractionated witnesses paid. Blueprints of the current Aurora complex development, all traced back to that parcel of land. And buried near the back of the folder, a line item for monthly payments to a private medical facility called New Hope Center for Wellness. But the name attached to the admission form made Thomas's blood turn to ice. Amelia. It was close but a deliberate misspelling. Hidden, tucked away under red tape and decades of silence. He stood there, unable to move, staring at the name, the amount paid, and the box that said Memory Suppression Program, confidential. They had buried a woman alive, stolen her land, stolen her child, and then locked her in a clinic under a different name while building an empire atop the ruins. And he was supposed to inherit it. Almas closed the file and held it to his chest, as if he could smother the shame that came with it. But shame wasn't enough anymore. He needed action. Back at the shop, Maya watched the sun dip behind the horizon with restless hands. Her fingers moved mechanically across an engine she didn't need to fix, just to keep busy. Her thoughts were racing toward a mother she might never see again, a past that had never made sense, and a man who might be the only person who could unlock all of it. Xavier stood behind her, watching. "He'll come back," he said gently. "You think so?" Maya replied without turning. "You've seen his eyes," Xavier said, "not his father." "Maybe," Maya whispered, "but that blood, it runs deep." The garage flickered as the front door creaked open. Amos walked in. No suit, no tie, but something new in his expression. He walked straight to Maya and handed her the folder. "Everything," he said. "All of it. Your mother, the forged documents, the clinic. It's all here." Maya stared at the folder like it was radioactive. "My God," she whispered, flipping through the pages, her hands shaking. "He forged her death. My mother didn't abandon me." Xavier stepped closer, his face darkening. "Ernesto Weber is a monster." Amos looked at him, then at Maya. "I know where she is." Maya's knees nearly buckled. "She's alive," she breathed. Nodded. He kept her in a private wing of the New Hope facility, under a fake name, for 20 years. The room went silent. Then Maya turned away, choking on air. "I spent my entire life thinking she left me," she said, her voice breaking. "I hated her for that. I hated myself." Amos wanted to speak, to offer something, but there were no words worthy of that pain. Xavier stepped forward. "We need to get her out." They won't let you near her, Thomas warned. She's under protection. The only way in is through the Weber access list. Maya stared at him, eyes suddenly flaring with something fierce. You're on that list, aren't you? Amos hesitated. And take me, she said. Tonight. The drive to New Hope was long, quiet. Inside it was cold, too cold. Amos led the way, his name opening doors that would otherwise stay shut. Maya followed, heart pounding, Xavier beside her like a shield. At the end of a sterile corridor, a nurse looked up. Mr. Weber, you're not expected. I need to see patient 4739, Thomas interrupted. Now. The nurse faltered. She's not permitted visitors. The woman blinked. Maya stepped forward. And I'm her daughter. Silence. Then the nurse slowly nodded. She led them to a quiet, more hotel suite than hospital cell. She hasn't spoken much in years, but she remembers things. Some things. Amos opened the door. And there by the window sat a woman in her early 50s, hair threaded with gray, hands resting in her lap. He turned slowly. Maya stepped in, her breath caught in her throat. Mom, she whispered. Amelia looked up, eyes wide. For a second there was nothing, just time catching up. Then Maya, she whispered, her voice cracked with Maya ran to her, collapsing into her mother's arms. I thought you were dead. I thought you left me. Amelia sobbed. They told me if I fought they'd take you too. Behind them Thomas turned away, tears stinging his eyes. Xavier put a hand on his shoulder. And for the first time in decades, the Oliveira family was whole, broken, battered, but together. Not because fate allowed it, but because the lies were finally being burned down. Session 4, Elise's discovery. Elise Harrington had never liked surprises. She was a woman who built her life on precision, meticulous plans, tailored contracts, and the unspoken rules of elite society. As the heiress to the Harrington fashion dynasty, she knew what things were worth: reputation, legacy, alliances. Why she agreed to marry Thomas Weber. Not for love, or power. But lately something about Thomas had changed. Meetings missed, calls unanswered, a hesitation in his voice she didn't recognize or trust. So when his assistant mentioned that Thomas had canceled 2 investor briefings without explanation, Elise did what she always did. He took control. At 6:47 a.m. sharp, Elise arrived at the Weber estate in a gray silk suit and Louboutin heels, sharp enough to draw blood. She didn't knock. She never needed to. The staff parted like shadows as she moved through the halls with a predator's grace. In Thomas's office, the desk was empty, but not untouched. Files were scattered, drawers slightly open, and on the side table a single manila folder lay apart from the rest, as if placed in haste. Project Aurora. Elise paused. She wasn't unfamiliar with the Aurora complex. The land acquisition had been one of Ernesto Weber's proudest victories, a cornerstone deal that made the company billions in water rights and development contracts. Curious, Elise opened the folder. He expected zoning permits, contractor quotes, maybe a budget sheet. What she found instead made her breath hitch. A death certificate. Handwritten annotations. Medical facility logs. Old photo of a woman with a sapphire ring, the same one Elise remembered seeing on the hand of a mechanic at a charity event years ago. Someone Thomas had stared at a little too long. And then, a familiar name, Amelia Oliveira. Elise's eyes narrowed. She flipped faster now, scanning signatures, matching dates. Her brain was trained for detail, contracts, loopholes, fine print. And here, in black and white, was something that didn't just smell like fraud. It reeked of conspiracy. He pulled out her phone and began taking pictures of every page. Then, as if by instinct, opened a new search. Amelia Oliveira, Weber Enterprises, Aurora Land. The results weren't obvious. But something was missing, too clean, too scrubbed. Which only confirmed what Elise had begun to suspect. This wasn't just a business deal. It was a cover-up. And Thomas Alfonso is buried somewhere in the middle of it. That night, Elise didn't attend the Harrington Gala. Instead, she drove out of the city, down the winding roads that led toward the desert town no one cared to map. He parked her Mercedes a block away from the address she had traced from the file, Hope Mechanical. The garage was still lit. Inside, she saw a woman, curly hair pulled back, her hands dark with grease, moving with quiet intensity. Elise had only seen her once before, at a company banquet years ago, where Thomas had spoken to her briefly, too briefly, but with a look Elise had never seen him give anyone. She'd dismissed it then. He couldn't know. Elise stepped into the garage, the sound of her heels like gunshots against the concrete. Maya turned around, instantly alert. "I don't take clients this late," she said, voice cautious. "Not a client," Elise replied. "I'm Thomas's fiancée." Silence. "Go heavy." Elise walked further in, eyes scanning the space. "You're the woman with the Maya didn't respond. "You fixed his car," Elise continued, "but you also broke something in him, didn't you?" Maya wiped her hands and leaned against the hood of the car she'd been working on. "What do you want?" "I want the truth." Maya tilted her head. "Funny. So do I." Elise pulled out her phone and held it up. Pictures of the Project Aurora file glowed on the screen. "I know about your mother," Elise said. "I know about the land, and I know what Ernesto Weber did to your family." Maya's breath caught, just slightly. "But here's the thing," Elise added, stepping closer. "You're not the only one he manipulated." Maya crossed her arms. "Let me guess. You're the pawn in his corporate chess game." "More like a queen who finally saw the board for what it was." Maya studied her for a long moment. "So what now? You want to help me bring him down?" "No," Elise said simply. "I want to help myself, but if bringing down Ernesto helps me too, then yes." Maya's eyes narrowed. "And what does helping yourself look like?" "Reclaiming control," Elise said. "Over Thomas, over my future, over the truth." He walked to the edge of the shop, then paused. "You're planning something, aren't you? A reveal, a confrontation?" Maya didn't answer, but the flicker in her eyes betrayed her. Elise smiled faintly. "I wouldn't you." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Why would I trust you?" "You shouldn't," Elise said honestly, "but we both want the same thing, even if for different reasons." "And what's that?" "Cut you go says." 2 days later, Thomas returned to the estate late, exhausted, his mind swimming in logistics. He had spent hours arranging security access at New Hope, quietly transferring Amelia into protective care, and fielding inquiries from nervous investors asking why he'd missed yet another meeting. As he entered the study, Elise was waiting. He sat on the edge of his desk, arms folded, one leg crossed over the other, calm as a storm on the horizon. "Long day?" she asked. Tomas stopped cold. "What are you doing here?" "Read," he said. She held up the file. "Project Aurora." His heart dropped. "Enough." "Don't bother," she interrupted. "I already know. All of it. The land, the clinic, the forged documents." "Maya." He stood slowly, stepping closer, her voice low and razor-sharp. "You were going to marry me without telling me any of this?" Thomas looked away. "I didn't want to drag you into it." "Too late," she snapped. A beat of silence passed. Then Elise's voice softened, but not with kindness. "I thought I was marrying a future titan," she said, "a man who understood legacy." "I do," he replied. "That's why I'm choosing to end it." Elise tilted her head. "You're really going to destroy the Weber name?" "I'm going to restore my mother's name," Thomas said. Elise stared at him for a long time, then gave a single nod. "But let's make it count." "What will help you?" she said. "I've already begun gathering press contacts, but we do this my way." Amos looked stunned. "Why?" "Because if I'm going down," she said with a cold smile, "I'm going down swinging, and when the dust settles I want my family's name as far from yours as possible." He started for the door, then paused. "Oh. And Thomas," she said, turning back. "You don't love me. You never did." Yeah. I'm not, she said, eyes hard. Because I never loved you either. And with that, Elise walked out of his life and into the firestorm they were about to ignite together. Session 5, the night at Central Square. The town square in Aurora had never looked so empty or so charged. The fountain gurgled quietly in the center, lights flickering above it like dying stars. A breeze moved through the branches of the old oak tree, the one Maya had passed 1,000 times without realizing how much it resembled the one from the orphanage, the tree under which she had once made a promise she never thought she'd have to keep. Maya sat on a bench, alone, the ring cool on her finger, her hands folded tightly in her lap. It was almost midnight. The message she sent had been simple. In Central Square, 20 minutes. Come alone. And now the square echoed with silence, except for the occasional gust that reminded her how exposed she was. He heard footsteps before she saw him. Come, dressed in dark slacks and a gray jacket, walking quickly, as if the shadows themselves pushed him forward. When their eyes met, neither said anything for a beat too long. Maya stood. He came. He stopped just a few feet from her, the space between them buzzing with questions neither had dared ask in daylight. For 20 years, Maya said softly, I wondered why my mother left me, why she never came back, why I never got a letter, a phone call, nothing. Thomas swallowed hard. Maya. I told myself 1,000 different stories, she said, stepping closer. She was poor. She was sick. She was dead. Her voice cracked. But none of them were as cruel as the truth. Thomas looked down, the weight of her words sinking into his chest. She didn't leave me, Maya said. She was taken. Buried alive, locked in a room and erased from history so your father could steal a piece of land. A tear slipped from her eye, but she didn't blink it away. He nodded slowly. I found the contract. The fake death certificate, the admission record under the alias. It was all there. He watched him closely. And what are you going to do with it? He took a breath. Expose it, he said, publicly. No more whispers, no more hiding. Maya's voice dropped. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, he nodded. The media will be there, investors, politicians. If there's ever a moment to tell the truth, it's then. She studied him, her gaze cautious but curious. You're sure? He met her eyes, finally. It was raised under a lie. I inherited a name soaked in silence, but if telling the truth means burning the whole thing down, then I'll light the first match myself. Maya exhaled slowly. Then from her coat she pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to him. What's this? He unfolded it. A photograph, old, weathered, creased, a young boy and girl sitting on the orphanage steps, holding a wooden bird. I found it last night, Maya said. I kept it hidden, for years. Thought maybe one day I'd run into you again, and throw it in your face. Thomas smiled faintly. You should. He looked down, but then I remembered something else. That boy, he gave me a ring, and he said something I never forgot. Thomas tilted his head. That I deserved to be seen. Silence again, but this time it felt different. Braver. I didn't see you, he said, voice low. Not yesterday. Not when I should have. I'm sorry, Maya. He held his gaze. I know. Then, after a beat, there's something else. She reached into her coat again and pulled out a smaller envelope. This came 8 years ago, she said. No return address, no name, just this. I opened it. A single piece of paper. On it a few simple lines, handwritten in soft cursive. I never stopped looking for you. I never stopped loving you. When the water is clean again, I'll come back. He looked up, stunned. This is her handwriting? Maya nodded. Xavier confirmed it, said she used to write him notes like this when they were young. She sent it from somewhere near New Hope. Yama stared at the words, heart pounding. She was fighting, even in silence. Exactly. Maya stood forward. If she didn't die, she waited. He nodded. And now she gets to speak. Maya looked at him sharply. What do you mean? She'll be there, Tamu said, at the event. I've already arranged security. We're bringing her in through the private entrance. Maya's hands flew to her mouth. Agreed. He nodded again. She wanted to tell her story, in her own words. Maya felt her knees weaken. She's strong, Thomas said. Like you. No, Maya whispered, she's stronger. A long pause. Then Maya reached out, slowly touched the bird brooch now clipped to Thomas's lapel. You kept, she said. Oh, he looked down at it. Some things you don't throw away, even when you're told to forget. Her fingers lingered. Why now, she asked. Why go against everything your father built? He hesitated. Because for 20 years I thought I knew who I was, but I was living someone else's script. His script, built on control, on silence, on obedience. He met her eyes again. But the moment I saw that ring I remembered who I really was, who you were. And who's that? He smiled sadly. The only girl who ever looked at me like I was enough. He blinked fast, as if trying to swallow something painful. You didn't want to say that. What? Because, I'm not asking you to, he said. Not yet. He stepped back. I'm just asking you to stand beside me, when we tell the truth, when we tear it all down. Maya looked up at the night sky. I don't want justice, she whispered. I want peace. Then let's give it to her, Thomas said. To your mother. To you. To the girl who waited too long in the dark. Maya nodded. And in that moment, under the streetlights beneath the ghost of a tree that had once held promises, they sealed another one. No signals. No witness. Just two people, broken by the same lie, willing to step into the light, together. Session 6. The stage, the cameras, and the truth. The Aurora complex shimmered under the floodlights, a towering monument of glass, steel, and silence. The media called it the heart of tomorrow. To Maya, it was built on stolen blood and buried screams. Tonight it would become a courtroom. The plaza was already buzzing with cameras and curious whispers. News vans were parked like vultures around the perimeter. Political figures mingled near velvet ropes. A symphony orchestra was tuning up under the canopies. Investors sipped champagne. Everything was staged to perfection. Except what was coming. Behind the main building, in a secured corridor far from the spotlight, Thomas stood in front of a mirror adjusting his tie. His reflection stared back, hollow, unrecognizable. He looked like a man ready to inherit power. But tonight he wasn't here to inherit. He was here to break the cycle. Elise entered the room behind him, clipboard in hand. The media's in place, she said, eyes never leaving his reflection. Your father's running 10 minutes late. Typical. Tighter than ever, but they don't know what we're planning. He turned to face her. You sure about things? I didn't come this far to back out now, she replied, eyes sharp. Besides, it's time someone reminded your father that the women in his orbit aren't decorations. He reached into a clutch and handed him a flash drive. The backup of everything. Documents, photos. The letter from Maya's mother. The feed will go live the moment you give me the signal. Amos closed his fingers around it. He took a breath. Let's burn it down. Maya waited in the side wing of the stage, standing next to Xavier and a small security detail Thomas had arranged. Beside her, seated in a wheelchair, was Amelia Oliveira. Her mother. Her hair was longer now, gray streaking through the once-back curls. Her face bore the lines of years spent waiting in silence, but her eyes were alert, watchful, alive. You don't have to do this, Maya whispered, touching her hand. I do, Amelia said gently. They took my voice once. I want it back. You're not afraid. Amelia looked toward the crowd beginning to gather in the central plaza, only of silence. Maya blinked back tears. You ready? Thomas asked, walking in from the corridor. Amelia looked at him for a long moment. The boy she once knew, now taller, haunted, trying to make amends. He nodded once. Thomas turned to Maya. You'll be right behind her? Always. He nodded. Then let's begin. The master of ceremonies took the stage, welcoming the crowd with rehearsed flair. Behind him, a massive LED screen displayed the Weber Enterprises logo over a sprawling view of the Aurora complex. And now he announced the man whose vision and legacy made this dream possible, Mr. Ernesto Weber. Applause erupted. From the entrance, Ernesto strode forward like a king, immaculate in his navy-tailored suit, his salt and pepper hair styled like a politician from another era. He waved to the crowd, posed for photos, and gave the kind of practiced smile that came from decades of selling charm as truth. He reached the podium. "Thank you," Ernesto began. "Tonight we inaugurate not just a building but a new era. Aurora represents sustainability, innovation, and the enduring legacy of the Weber name." Behind the scenes, Elise's hand hovered over her phone. "Wait. Maya moved to the side of the stage, out of sight, one hand resting on the push handles of her mother's wheelchair. "The promise that our company will always prioritize integrity." Gamache stepped out into the lights. The crowd hushed. Ernesto faltered. "Yamas?" he asked, the microphone picking up his confusion. "This wasn't—" "I'm sorry to interrupt," Thomas said into a separate mic, "but there's something the public deserves to know." A beat of silence. Then, Elise tapped her screen. The massive LED behind them flickered. The Weber logo vanished, and in its place appeared the first page of the Project Aurora file, the forged deed. The crowd gasped. "The hell are you doing?" Ernesto hissed, dropping his mic and stepping toward his son. Thomas didn't flinch, telling the truth. More documents appeared on the screen. The death certificate, the land survey, the alias from the psychiatric clinic. Whispers rippled through the audience. Thomas stepped back from the podium. "I present to you," he said, "the true owner of this land." Maya wheeled her mother forward. The camera zoomed in. Amelia Oliveira lifted her chin, every movement full of quiet dignity. Her voice trembled, but it was clear. "My name is Amelia Oliveira. 21 years ago I was drugged, declared dead, and imprisoned so that this company could steal what was mine." Chaos erupted. Ernesto lunged forward, red with rage. "Get them off this stage." But Xavier was already blocking him. He warned him. Elise stood calmly, recording everything with clinical precision. Maya stepped to the mic. "You built this empire on lies," she said, her voice ringing like a bell. "On stolen land, on stolen lives." Ernesto grabbed a mic from a staffer. "This is a setup. These people—"
"You forged her death certificate," Thomas said coldly. "You admitted it. I recorded it."
He held up his phone. "You threatened her life. You buried your crimes under concrete and called it progress." Ernesto's mask finally cracked. "You ungrateful bastard." "Not your son," Thomas said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Dead silence. "My real name is Thomas Oliveira. I was taken from an orphanage to replace the child you lost, raised to carry on your legacy of silence. But that ends now." Amelia reached for Maya's hand. The crowd around them murmured in disbelief, and then the sirens began to wail. Elise. Multiple units, lights flashing. "We have a warrant," an officer shouted. "Ernesto Weber, you're under arrest for conspiracy, document forgery, kidnapping, and unlawful detainment." Ernesto's face went ashen. "You think this changes anything?" he spat at Thomas as he was cuffed. Thomas looked at him. "No, but it changes." 30 minutes later, the plaza was clearing out. Reporters flooded Maya with questions. Cameras followed Amelia until she was safely escorted to a waiting vehicle. Thomas stood at the edge of the stage, alone, watching the lights dim. Maya joined him. "You okay?" she asked. He gave a short laugh. "No, but I'm free."
She looked at him, eyes softer now. "Your mother would be proud." He turned to her. "And so is yours." They stood in silence for a moment, just breathing, just being. And then she asked, "What happens next?" He looked toward the building. "We tear it down, and we build something real." She nodded. And as the last spotlight faded, two children born into silence finally stepped into their voices. Together.
Session 7: Bloodlines and Betrayals. The fallout was immediate. The headline exploded across every major news outlet. Billion-dollar lie. Weber empire built on stolen land and silence. Amelia Oliveira declared dead. Thomas Weber renounced his name after exposing father's crimes. Investors fled, board members resigned, and within 48 hours, Ernesto Weber's assets were frozen. But none of that prepared Thomas for what came next. He stood alone in the vast study of the Weber estate, the silence pressing on him like a weighted fog. It didn't feel like a home anymore, only a crime scene soaked in mahogany and deceit. Boxes surrounded him, files, personal belongings, decades of curated legacy now reduced to piles of paper and porcelain. He opened the last drawer of his father's desk. It was locked. He used the key Ernesto always kept hidden behind the bookshelf, a place he'd once shown Thomas as a secret like a... The drawer creaked open. Inside, an old leather-bound file with a gold clasp and a tag that read, then Thomas hesitated and opened but were Musi Foster intake sheets, handwritten notes, one photograph, a new board. The label read, Thomas Oliveira, intake record, Orphan Heart Orphanage. His knees buckled. His heart thundered. He flipped further and found a birth certificate, but not the one he'd always seen. This one was faded. Mother to Count Amelia Oliveira. Father to unknown. Born June 9, 1995. He stared at the page, every breath suddenly heavier. His eyes darted to a second file beneath it. Another intake record. Subject, Maya Oliveira. Mabilit Open Heart Orphanage, June 9, 1995. Same orphanage. Came up. A tidal wave hit. He whispered. But he found the forged files next, the ones used to falsify Maya's abandonment, the papers that claimed she was placed in care due to maternal unfitness, all signed by Ernesto. And then came the note that cracked him open. It was a letter, tucked between the adoption approvals and the falsified ID papers. Written in Erska's own hand. The girl is too much like her. Let her go. But keep the boy. He has no defects. He'll carry the Weber name better than the lost one did. Thomas dropped the paper. His stomach turned. It was never about love. Never about family. He wasn't adopted to be saved. He was selected because he was convenient. He looked at the baby photo again. Same soft eyes. Same shape as Maya's. Mira, Squidin. They weren't just two forgotten children who crossed paths again. They were siblings. When separated by lies, reunited by fate, and nearly lost to a truth no one had dared name. That night Maya was back at the shop, flipping through newspaper clippings when she heard a knock on the door. Damas stood there, soaked in rain. She could tell. His eyes, those eyes that used to feel like home, now looked like a storm waiting to break. You found something, she said. He nodded. I didn't want it to be true. Maya stiffened. What? He walked in slowly, dripping across the concrete floor, holding the file in his hand. He placed it gently on her workbench. He opened it. Her breath caught before she even turned the second page. Side-by-side records, birth dates, fingerprint. My God, she whispered. He stepped back. I did. No, I swear to you, my tears welled in her eyes. All this time, she whispered, you were my brother. I'm sorry, Thomas said, voice cracking. I had no idea. He took you from her, then took me, split us apart. She sat down heavily, the weight of the revelation knocking the air from her lungs. The ring, the bird, we were trying to find our way back to each other, she whispered. and we didn't even know. Thomas's voice was hollow. I was raised thinking I was chosen, but I was stolen, just like you. She looked up at him, 1,000 memories flashing through her mind. The boy at the orphanage, the promise under the tree, the way their paths had collided again in impossible ways. Now, it all made sense. Their bond had never been romantic. It had always been cellular. Unspoken. Maya reached across the table and took his hand. Not in affection. In recognition. We have the same blood, she said, and we both lost everything. He nodded, but maybe now he can rebuild it. Later that night, Xavier sat across from them in the back of the shop, the file open between them. I always suspected, he said quietly. You were born minutes apart. She never got to hold you both. By the time the ambulance came, only Maya was left. And it twice bribed the staff, Xavier finished. Took you before anyone could stop it. Said your mother died. It was in the paper the next day. Except she didn't die. She just disappeared. Thomas exhaled. He made me a Weber, but I was never one. No, Xavier said. You were always Alvera, like her, like Maya. Silence lingered between them. Maya turned toward Tomas. So, what now? He met her gaze. We don't hide, he said. We don't change names. We don't vanish like she had. He stood. We rebuild, under our name, not his. Maya smiled softly. And the ring? He looked at her hand, the sapphire glowing under the low shop. It stays with you, he said. It always belonged to you. And as the storm rolled in outside, thunder rumbling, rain streaking the windows, 2 orphans, once broken, now stood side by side. Not as strangers. Not as victims. But as twins. As unravels. The bloodline they'd tried to erase had just come roaring back. Session 8. The will that changed everything. It had been 6 days since the fall of the Weber Empire. 6 days since Thomas renounced the name he was raised under. 6 days since Maya learned she had a twin brother, and that her family had been torn apart by ambition and lies. But the past wasn't done with them yet. The formal letter arrived in a navy blue envelope sealed with gold embossing. Ernesto L. Weber, Last Will and Testament. Thomas opened it slowly, seated beside Maya in the small back room of Hope Mechanical. Amelia sat quietly across from them, her hands folded, face unreadable. The document was addressed to Thomas, more specifically, to my son, in name only. Maya leaned forward as he began to read aloud. If you're reading this, I am likely dead, incarcerated, or disgraced. And if you are reading this, it means you finally chose weakness over power. Thomas's jaw tightened. You were never meant to feel, Thomas. That's what made you dangerous. I gave you everything, the Weber name, a legacy, a seat at the throne. He threw it all away, for a woman, for a lie. Maya's eyes flashed, but she said nothing. You were never mine. You were acquired, positioned, molded, but I made you into a man of influence, even if you didn't deserve it. Tomas's hands gripped the paper tighter. He continued reading, voice steady despite the tremble beneath it. But I anticipated your betrayal, and so I crafted this document with care. Upon my death or legal incapacitation, control of the Weber board reverts not to you, but to Elise Harrington. Maya sat up straight. Elise? He nodded grimly. He understands power. She respects legacy. He will ensure the Weber name survives. And you can go back to being what you were always meant to be. Nuck. He stopped reading. Silence filled the room. Amelia's voice, soft but sharp, broke it. He hated weakness because he feared it. Maya shook her head. He wrote this to wound you, even after everything came out. Thomas folded the letter slowly, but didn't look away from it. He knew he wouldn't take the company, so he gave it to someone he thought could preserve his illusion. Except, Maya said, he didn't know Elise had already switched sides. Thomas looked at her, lips parting slightly. You think she'll fight him even after death? Maya's tone was certain. She's a Harrington. She doesn't lose. That evening, Elise Harrington stood at the head of the Weber boardroom. The room that once echoed with Ernesto's bark now sat in hollow silence, its leather chairs empty, its windows reflecting a city that had already moved on. The courier had delivered the will earlier that day. She read it in its entirety. She poured herself a glass of Cabernet. And then she smiled. Because even in his final insult who gifted her the throne, what he didn't realize was that she no longer wanted his kingdom. He wanted to build her own. The next day Tonopus received a call. It was Elise. "You got the will, I assume," she said, voice crisp but not unkind. "I read every word." "Well, congratulations," she said. "You're off the hook. The company's mine." Thomas sighed. That's what he wanted. "Except I don't want it." He blinked. "Excuse me." "I'm transferring ownership," Elise said casually. "All non-criminal assets. The land, the equity, the charitable foundations. Everything. To the Oliva Foundation. Effective immediately." Amos stood in stunned silence. "You're serious?" "As a blood test," she replied. The company's name will change. The board will dissolve. And the profits, what's left of them, will go to repairing what was broken." Elise paused. "Because I found my line," she said, "and I don't want to be remembered as the woman who stood on the wrong side of it." She hung up. Later that afternoon, Maya stepped into the garage to find Thomas staring at a document. "What is it?" she asked. He handed it to her, his voice quiet. Elise transferred control to the Oliva Foundation. Maya blinked. "That means we now control what's left of the Weber fortune." Maya sank slowly onto a nearby stool, the paper in her lap. "You could have been CEO. I never wanted that life." He looked at him. He looked around the garage, at the grease-streaked walls, at the workbench, at the photo of their mother pinned to the bulletin board. "I want to rebuild, but not from the top of a tower." Maya smiled softly. "So what do we do first?" He returned to her smile. "We give the land back to its people." 1 month later, the headlines shifted again. Oliva Foundation to convert Weber Complex into environmental reserve and community hub. A former mechanic and her twin brother restore family legacy. From scandal to sanctuary, the fall and rise of Aurora. Thomas and Maya stood together at the front of a newly restored building, the very heart of the former Aurora complex. Now it bore a new name. Amelia House Center for Justice, Restoration and Hope. Amelia cut the ribbon herself, her hands steady, her eyes bright. And in the front row, children from the neighborhood clapped and cheered, unaware that the building they now played in had once been a monument to silence. Now it was a sanctuary of truth. That night, Maya stood under the stars outside the building, the sapphire ring still on her hand. Thomas joined her, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "You ever think about what could have been?" he asked. Maya didn't answer right away. He said, "Sometime." He nodded, but he thought about what he looked out across the land. The place where their mother had nearly died. The place where their lives had been divided. The place they had reclaimed. "For years," he said, "I thought my story was about rising above where I came from." He looked at her. "But now I know. My story started with you. With her. With all the things they tried to erase." Maya sipped her tea. "And look what grew back. Succession." The final confession. The air at Amelia House had changed. It no longer smelled of sterilized concrete and silence. Now it carried the warm hum of laughter, the scent of fresh paint and soil. Children ran through the courtyards. Volunteers sorted books and meals. And Maya walked the halls with a quiet pride that came not from revenge, but from restoration. But peace is often the calm before revelation. And that morning, peace came with a knock on the glass door. Kazabia opened it first. An older man stood there, maybe in his late 60s. Pale skin, tired eyes, a slight tremor in his hand as he clutched a tattered leather binder. He looked out of place, too formal, too haunted. Looking for Maya Oliveira, he said. Maya emerged from the hallway, confused. That's me. The man nodded, his voice rough. My name is Leonard Bryce. I used to work for your grandfather. Her eyes narrowed. Ernesto Weber? No, the man replied. For your grandfather. Arturo Oliveira, your mother's father. Amos had just arrived, coffee in hand, when he heard the name. Come in, he said cautiously. Let's talk. They sat in the small conference room. The man opened his binder, revealing old ledgers, letters, blueprints, yellowed with age but meticulously preserved. I was a surveyor, Leonard explained. Back in the early 90s, I worked on land development deals between families in this region and local infrastructure investors. Your family's land had something rare. Maya leaned in. The aquifer? Leonard nodded. The largest freshwater reserve in a 200-mile radius. Deep, renewable, and untouched. It wasn't just valuable, it was irreplaceable. He pulled out a map. This, he said, pointing to a highlighted area, was the original Oliva estate. Nearly 180 acres, stretching beyond what Ernesto acquired in the deal that stole your knob. Damas's brow furrowed, but the records only show 40 acres. Leonard's eyes darkened. That's because Ernesto forged the transfer, but before that he did something worse. He pulled out an envelope, smaller than the room. Inside was a cassette tape. I kept this hidden for over 20 years, Leonard said, out of fear, out of guilt. But watching Amelia on television, seeing her stand there after all these years, his voice broke. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Maya took the tape carefully. What's on it? Leonard's hands trembled. A conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. Ernesto and your grandfather, 2 weeks before Arturo died. Utamud stood suddenly alert. Wait, he didn't die of a heart attack. Leonard shook his head. That's what they told everyone, but I was there. I saw him the night he collapsed. Xavier leaned forward. What happened? Leonard took a long breath. Arturo was about to back out of the water deal. Said it didn't sit right with him, that it would harm the land. Ernesto got... He tapped the cassette. By the next morning, Arturo was dead. No autopsy. Ernesto paid off the coroner. Maya's blood ran cold. You think he killed him? I think, Leonard said quietly, he made sure no one would stop him from building the Weber empire. Amos was pacing now. This changes everything. This makes it murder. Leonard nodded, but I couldn't prove it back then, and I was afraid. I buried the tape in a safe deposit box and walked away. Maya looked at the cassette like it might burn through the table. Amos turned to her. We need to hear it. 2 hours later, in a private studio within the newly restored Amelia house, Thomas, Maya, Xavier, and Leonard sat in a circle around an old tape player. The audio hissed to life. At first it was static, muffled conversation, papers rustling. Then Ernesto's unmistakable voice, colder and younger. You're stalling, Arturo, we had a... Then another voice, gentler, firm. Arturo Oliveira. I said I'd think about it, but now I've seen the impact reports. The water system, the ecosystem would collapse. Ernesto laughed, low, mocking. You think this is about frogs and roots? This is about the future. No, Ernesto. This is about greed. Montate shuffled through the shifted main to it. Do not test me, old man. I've already lined up 3 signatures. You hold me back now, I bury this whole thing, and you with it. A pause. You touch my family and I will destroy you. Your family is already mine. And the click of a chair. A scuffle. And silence. The tape ended. Maya stared ahead, unmoving. Amos turned away, jaw clenched, barely breathing. That's it, Leonard said. That's what I've carried for 20 years. Xavier stood slowly, voice shaking. That man didn't just steal your land. He stole your history. To it. Let's make it public. She nodded. Not because it would change the past, but because the truth deserved to live where silence had been planted. The next morning, the Oliva Foundation held a press conference on the very grounds where the Weber complex had once broken ground. News outlets crowded the courtyard, expecting updates on the rehabilitation efforts. Instead, they got history. Thomas took the stage, Maya beside him. He didn't speak of betrayal or impotence. He put the tape in its entire. But the world heard the voice that had shaped his life, not as a father but as an architect of control, abuse, and death. Gasps rippled across the crowd. Reporters yelled questions. Camera shutters snapped. Maya stepped forward. My grandfather Arturo Oliveira didn't die of natural causes. He died standing up for our land, our water, our truth. He held up the sapphire ring, a photo of Arturo wearing it on his pinky, decades earlier. This was his, passed to my mother, then to me. They tried to erase us, but we're still here. Thomas took the mic again. It was raised under his roof, but I am not his legacy. I am hers, Amelia's, Arturo's, Maya's. He stepped back, and in that moment a dynasty crumbled, not under protest. That night, back at the shop, Maya and Thomas sat on the steps outside, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars. You ever wonder if he kept you because he saw something good? Maya asked softly. Thomas shook his head. He kept me because he thought he could use me. But in the end, she said, you were the one who undid him. He looked at her. We both did. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. And whereas, just be like, and truth. In the silence that finally felt Session 10, the name we chose. It had been 1 year since the fall of the Weber Empire. A year since Amelia Oliveira walked out of the shadows of her stolen life. A year since Maya and Thomas discovered they were not just orphans, but twins. A year since the truth silenced decades of lies. And now, in the skrank air of Aurora, something new was blooming. The city was quiet. No press, no podiums, no investors. Just a wide open field behind Amelia House, once a restricted zone surrounded by barbed wire and security cameras, now rich with planted trees, benches, and the hum of rebuilding. A new sign stood at the entrance, painted in deep olive green, edged with gold. Oliveira Springs, a sanctuary of justice and renewal. Maya stood at its base, one hand on the sign, the other holding a bouquet of wildflowers. Her overalls were speckled with dust. Behind her, dozens of volunteers, teachers, farmers, mothers, watched in silence. Amelia stepped beside her. He wore a new suit. Just a simple button-down, rolled sleeves, dirt on his palms. He had just helped dig the final irrigation channel that would run clean spring water from the aquifer to the nearby town. His own version of reparations. Maya took a breath and began to speak. My grandfather's land was stolen. My mother's life was erased. Our note were silenced for decades. But names don't. They wait. She looked at the crowd. Today we restore the name they tried to bury. Applause rippled gently through the space. Damu stepped forward. It was raised under a name I didn't choose. A name built on power, secrecy, and fear. But names are more than inheritance. They are intention. He turned to Maya. She chose hers. I choose mine now. He held up a small paper, signed and notarized. Damus Oliveira. Gasps from the crowd, but proud ones. He looked at Maya. No more shadows, he said. No more lies. Later that evening, back at the garage-turned-community hub, Amelia sat under the shade of a new tree. Her eyes traced the way Maya moved, organizing tools, helping a teen repair an old bike. Across the yard, Thomas spoke with a group of high school students about building a water purification system using leftover materials. Amelia smiled, then looked down at the journal in her lap. On the first page, in careful script, she had written, "For the children they tried to separate, who found their way back to each other and turned pain into purpose." That night, the siblings sat on the roof of Amelia House, watching scars scatter like secrets waiting to be told. A soft breeze rolled over the field below them, carrying laughter from the community gardens and children's tents. "You ever think we'll stop missing what we lost?" Maya asked. Thomas looked up at the sky. No, but maybe. We'll stop needing revenge to fill the silence. She nodded. Do you miss him? She asked after a beat. You're not. He didn't answer immediately. Sometimes, he admitted, not who he was, but who I believed he could have been. He looked at him surprised. I don't hate him anymore, Thomas said quietly. Hate kept me tied to him. I'm done carrying his weight. And Elise? Maya asked. A soft chuckle. She sent us a bottle of wine and a note last week. Maya smirked. Let me guess, imported, handwritten, and absolutely unreadable? Pretty much, he said. But she's funding 4 scholarships for orphaned kids under the Aurora Foundation now. That's her way. She may have been raised in ivory, Maya said, but she knows how to swing a hammer when it counts. They both laughed. Then Maya turned to him seriously. I'm proud of you. Thomas swallowed, his throat tightening. I'm proud of us. In the weeks that followed, Olivera Springs opened its first community center, a place where displaced families, formerly incarcerated citizens, and foster children could find refuge, education, and purpose. The aquifer, once hoarded behind legal red tape, now flowed into public use. Maya started a vocational school for young women who wanted to become engineers and mechanics, under a program named after her mother. Thomas began writing a book, The Boy Who Wasn't Chosen. Not about vengeance. About truth. And the truth kept multiplying. On the first anniversary of the Weber collapse, an envelope arrived, addressed to Maya and Thomas. No return name. Inside was a single photo. Amelia. Much younger, much Chiara he couldn't change. The date, June 9, 1995. On the back, in faded pink, they told me I had to choose. I never did. I never stopped believing you'd find each other again. No signature. Just the handwriting they both knew, like brick. It was the last missing piece. And it closed the circle. That night, Thomas stood on stage under soft lantern lights strung across the garden. He read an excerpt from his book, voice steady, said, They thought love was fragile. But love remembers. Love finds its way through blood, through lies, through years of silence. And with a quick empire, the audience was silent. Immoved. He looked at Maya. She nodded. They stepped down together, not into legacy, but into choice. The name they chose wasn't about ego. It was about belonging. And in a world that had tried to erase them, choosing each other was the most radical act of all. Incongruous, the truth that chose them. In the end, this story was never just about a broken-down car on a forgotten road. It was about a broken family, a forgotten name, and 2 siblings, torn apart by greed, who found their way back to each other not through wealth, but through courage. Maya was never just a mechanic. He was a daughter, a sister, a legacy cat, the woman everyone overlooked, who ended up becoming the anchor that brought justice back to her family's name. And Tomas? He wasn't the billionaire everyone believed he was. He was a boy searching for a past he didn't know was stolen. He walked away from everything: money, power, and the trick. It set them free. They didn't rise because they were powerful. They rose because they chose love over legacy, truth over titles, and healing over hatred. 1. Blood doesn't make a family, but truth does. What was built on lies can never offer peace, but when we choose honesty, even the deepest wounds can begin to heal. 2. Sometimes the ring you wear holds more than a jewel. It holds a promise. Passed from mother to child, that sapphire ring wasn't just a relic. It was a thread. 3. Forgiveness is not weakness. It's the choice to stop bleeding from a wound you didn't cause. Yamus could have become like his father. Instead, he chose the hard path, the right one. That's what makes him a real man, not money. 4. We don't always get to choose where we begin, but we always get to choose where we go next. Maya and Tomas didn't find each other in a boardroom. They found each other where they were most human, in grief, in silence, in that one final act of truth. 5. Legacy is not what we inherit. The Aurora name became something sacred not because it was powerful, but because it endured. If this story touched you, if this story made you cry, remember your mother, or whisper finally at the screen, you're not alone. Tell us in the comments. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything? Like this video if you believe that truth is always worth telling. Subscribe for more emotional stories that remind us sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with a whisper and a